Thank you so much for joining us today for Creative Minds, Binh Danh and Trinh Mai. I hope you have enjoyed the introductory music by Emmy Award-winning musician and composer Van An Vanessa Vo. Creative Minds is SJMA's premier artist talk series. It provides audiences with an opportunity to meet artists and hear directly from them as they talk about their creative processes and practices. Today's presentation features artists Jin Mai and Binh Danh and is moderated by Trami Cron, Executive Director of Chopsticks Alley. SJMA is proud to be partnering with Chopsticks Alley, the artists on today's panel, and Van An Vo on Hidden Heritages, a project which you'll soon learn more about. I'm particularly happy to welcome both of our artists today who I admire, know personally, and I'm so happy to get to know even more now that I've moved to San Jose 5 years ago. We are grateful to the California Arts Council for their support of this project through a Creative California Communities grant. But before I turn it over to Trami, one request. After the program, you'll receive a brief survey at the email address that you use to register for this program. We'd be very grateful for your feedback as we work to develop virtual programming to best serve our community throughout the shelter-in-place period. So, take it away, Trami.
Thank you, Sarah, for being here with us, and we're so excited to do this program today with San Jose Museum of Art. So let me share a little bit about Hidden Heritages. San Jose's Vietnamese Legacy is a 2-year collaboration between the San Jose Museum of Art, Chopsticks Alley, and the City of San Jose's Office of Cultural Affairs. The project brings Vietnamese artists and community members together to share, amplify, and artistically present stories that reveal the contributions of Vietnamese Americans to San Jose, one of California's most diverse cities. Hidden Heritages launched in the fall of 2019 with a creative learning workshop led by artists Binh Danh and Jin Mai for elders in the San Jose Vietnamese community. The works created by the elders were exhibited in a special exhibition titled Up-O at San Jose's Community Day Lunar New Year in February of this year. A second cyanotype workshop was recently completed via Zoom in 2020. When we are able to, the project will culminate with an exhibition at San Jose City Hall and a performance by Van An Vo, featuring an original composition inspired by the stories collected from the San Jose Vietnamese community. Today, we will hear from the two leading artists designing creative learning workshops for this project, Jin Mai and Binh Danh. Both artists use family archives of photographs, memorabilia, and memories to influence their work. We're looking forward to learning all about that today. So our first presenter for today is Jin Mai. So I'm going to remove myself from Spotlight here so we can see everyone and also see Jin Mai. Jin Mai is a California-based artist and educator whose work ranges from her first love of oil on canvas to installations built from materials she inherits and gathers from nature. Since graduating with a BFA from San Jose State University and furthering her studies at UCLA, she has continued exhibiting nationally with works in public and private collections internationally. So she's a big deal, just saying. Her current work confronts the fear, injustice, and the devastation that has heralded our world, our communities, and our refugee and immigrant families, past and present. Seeking hope within humanity's struggle in war and hardship, she has partnered with various organizations, including the International Rescue Committee and San Diego Art Institute, in developing socially engaging projects with survivors of war from all over the world. A recipient of the University of Washington's prestigious Walker Ames Fellowship, Mai continues to lead academic and arts institutions to engage the community in creative storytelling. Her aim is to foster collective healing and to find an enduring hope that will buoy us as we navigate an uncertain future. And especially now, it is much needed. So with that, Jin Mai, please take it away.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you everyone for joining. For years, I've been making work to illustrate the discoveries while excavating my family history and the refugee immigrant story. And currently, I'm focusing on the current immigration refugee crisis and dovetailing it into history. So, really examining the way history is repeating itself and has continued to repeat itself politically, communally, personally, and also speak about these inherited wars and the inherited strength that surfaces therefrom. So we don't always know what our strengths are until we're put in situations of adversity. So I really try to harness that in my work just to help share some hope, because we need it always. And this also leads to the work that I do about healing as well. So my body of work is essentially a culmination of story, material, sometimes tools, the need to know, the desire to share, and possibly the responsibility to tell these stories for us and for those who came before us too, so that we can remember. Okay, so the process is pretty organic. Sometimes the story inspires material, sometimes the material inspires the story, and sometimes it takes me years to find the connections. So it requires a lot of patience so that I can find the way the narratives and mediums kind of weave themselves together. And then I'm working frantically. So I have this weird relationship with art where it's like completely contradictory, but it works. So I want to first introduce you to my bongwai. This is my grandmother, my mother's mother. And this is her, her immigration photo, actually, or her passport photo. And so she was one of the people who told me a lot about my family history, because I was so fortunate to be able to spend so much time with her. And she was the one that really launched my work into this family focused work. And so I'm going to show you some other. So here's her ID. I remade this. Look at the little heart in there. Isn't that cool? So like a little hole punch. And then here's her fingerprints here in the back that I love. So I'm really into, I love the marks, like the human marks, the fingerprints, because they're unique to us. So there it is. So these two images actually inspired me to experiment more on fingerprints here. So I just took out a piece of paper and I just started dabbing my fingers on it. And I loved the way that the layering created the density of the black there. And so this became this. And I was so excited because I didn't plan for this to happen, and it did. And those things happen to me in the studio all the time, and it keeps my work really, it keeps it fluid, and it keeps me experimenting because I need to play in the studio. You know, a lot of the work that I do is very, it's serious, right? It's about war and tragedy, and then healing. So I try to play in the studio as well. And then these things come about. So this is 2016, 18 by 24, actually. And so speaking of play, here's my mom's ID. And then I actually made my own because I was like, I want one too. So yeah, a lot of play in the studio to keep my hands moving and keep me excited about the process. Also inspired from that piece is this piece here. So here's, this is ink. You can kind of see the sheen of that. Ink, charcoal, and this leaf here that I found. So from the time I found the leaf and saved it, 7 years had gone by until it told me what it wanted to be. So I was working on this portrait of Bang Wai, and then Hien and I were going through so much family stuff, and we were just broken. So we decided to go to the park during heavy rainfall. And I saw this leaf just being pelted by the rain and just like tattered. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is us. We're just like barely trying to hold on to our shape here. And so I just thought there was something really beautiful about it. So I incorporated it. And so, okay, the synchronicities. I did not alter this leaf. And once I had finished the portrait, there was so much negative space. I didn't really know what to do with it. So I was rummaging through my work and I just placed this leaf on her face to see what would happen. And look how it dots the eye. It wraps her head. The contour kind of continues there. And then almost like a scarf that goes around her neck. Like, I can't plan that. So yeah, these are the moments that I just get really excited about.
I have to chime in real quick because that just looks so amazing. Can you put it up again? It's just, I mean,
yeah,
I feel like I can like do this, but no way, because it only takes you to
no,
create something so beautiful, like where the eye is and where the nose and how the leaves fit. Sorry, I gotta jump in. Okay.
so no, so that's the whole thing. Is it's actually not. I cannot take full credit. Like you said, only you, and it's like, well, I feel like it's really a co-creative process. That's what my process is, because I cannot plan this, and I didn't plan it. I just kind of walk into the unknown, but I expect things. So I walk into the unknown and I work and I put my time in and I just wait. Yeah, excuse me. So yeah, excited. I'm really excited about those moments. Thank you, Jemmy, for giving me way too much credit. So here's another image that really struck me. So this is my father-in-law, my husband's father. And this photo is the original photo that was taken while he was imprisoned in the re-education camp in Vietnam. And we received this photo in 2001. So I have a story about that. So if you want to know about how we got this photo and why we needed it, you can ask later. I also have a story about fingerprints, memory of fingerprints. But yeah, too many stories. So here's like some of the back. Look at that. It's like, oh my goodness. Yeah, a lot of history there, and a lot of questions that I don't know to ask. So that's one of the frustrating things. So this was in 2001 when we received this, and also his original release papers. I'm shaking as I'm opening this up for you. So just really, so these are the original papers that we have. So 15 years later, I printed it because I was like, something needs to be done. So this is at Chrome Digital here, and that's like 40 by 60. So 15 years after we received. And that became this. So those are his bullet wounds there. There's 17 bullet wounds that he survived from, long enough to come to America and watch and raise his family and watch his children graduate from college. It's just so amazing. So I recreated these bullet wounds by rubbing tears and Vietnam rainwater into them. Here's some scripture. It says, "Blessed is the man who endures when he has been ... fill in the blank." That's all of us. So
And the written letters are in Sanskrit, is that correct?
Yes, they're in Sanskrit. So we had to actually go to a Buddhist temple and have some monks like translate. It was pretty amazing. Yeah, Sanskrit here. And this is about the growth the potential growth that can sprout from these wounds. So there's real growth there. And then these wounds are made of copies of his release papers. So this is in a book actually that I just published with Shan Ray, who's a writer and poet from Washington State. Yeah, and it's his poetry with my artwork and my artist statements as well. Yeah, really excited about this book. His work is on leadership and forgiveness and genocide, actually. So our work dovetails really nicely together. Okay, I'm gonna whip you around because in speaking of, I just showed you these physical external war wounds. Now I wanna show you what I'm working on as far as like the internal wounds. So I don't know how the lighting's looking.
It looks good.
Okay, yay! All right, so here's some stones. These are sandstones that are collected from Pacifica all the way down to San Diego. And so when Bak Boon was imprisoned, he actually, he was held in a cell whose ceiling was lower than his height. So what that did was it ruptured 2 of his discs and he had to get them removed. So he had 2 vertebrae removed. And so I wanted to recreate that. So this was done in 2016. And just last year I thought of this. So I imagine this being displayed under. So I'm gonna kind of stand so you can kind of see. So here's the 33 stones that represent our 33 vertebrae. And there's a lifeline that runs through them. And he served as a governor in Vietnam for 2 terms. And then when he came to America, he worked in the fields and multiple fields, whatever was in season. And he also worked in the oil fields. So speaking of synchronicities, I asked Hien, I was like, how do we get some oil? I want oil from this field. He's like, you can't just walk into an oil refinery and ask them for oil. And I was like, but I want it. Like, I need it. And so then I kind of let that idea, well, I didn't really let it go, but I just kind of like wrote it off. And we had gone to Refugio State Beach to collect these stones because I had the idea for the spine. And we arrived just a few weeks after there was an oil spill. And we found stones with oil on it. I mean, how does that happen? So I was really excited about that. Yeah, so a lot of, thought on life in Vietnam during the war, escape, and then arrival. So I'm gonna turn you back around so we can talk about cotton. Sorry. Let me scurry out of there.
I'm amazed at all your camera angles. You have like X's all over your room or what? You're doing great.
I had it all set up. I'm a little like, I get something like that. Okay. So Hien came home with raw cotton on one of his trips back. Oh, I love this cotton so much. Look how beautiful that is. I'd never seen raw cotton in my life. And he brings me home this cotton. And I was like, we need to collect more, of course, like more materials for more things. So here's me squatting, Saigon squatting. That's an actual term. That's like athletes Saigon squat. I love that.
I've got it down, okay? You have the genes, you have it down. I'm sure Ben can do it too.
That is right. So there's those beautiful cotton fields. Here's me again squatting, always squatting. Separating the cotton balls from the stems. Here's another image. I really like this image of me de-seeding them, which took forever, like this many. This is like 15 hours worth of work. It's crazy. But I was really excited about this, and I just learned the story a few months ago, where Hien was telling me about, and some of y'all have already heard the story, but Hien had, when his family worked in the fields, they had these bird cages in the farms to trap the birds to help keep the crops from being eaten. And his family was so poor, they would capture these birds, and his mom made this drawstring sack out of rice sack to keep the birds in, and they would bring them home to eat. And so Hien wanted to help, and he was a little guy, and he goes into the cage and he catches the bird and he holds it in his hand, and the heat coming from the body just alarmed him. And then the heartbeat was beating so fast, so he let it go. And his father asks, why did you let the bird go? And he says, because the bird was afraid and I didn't want to see it afraid. Just like that story is so endearing because it just describes his compassion even at a young age, and then his father honoring that compassion of this little boy. So I decided to make a bird, just not for an art project as much as it was, well, it was because I don't sew the things. So it was definitely a feat, but I wanted to feel the bird in my hand like he did. So it was kind of just a way that I could kind of relive it. And so this is my grandmother's fabric that I inherited, and it's stuffed with this cotton. And they started breeding. So I have, bring you back around in the studio. So here's, lighting might not be too good, but here's the birds that I made. So these are the ones I've made so far. And so it's really speaking on the history, right? So here we have this mass exodus in 75. That's actually a rice sack that my grandmother gave me. So it's also honoring Hien's memory. So here are the birds that are escaping, and then it comes right back around full circle, and now these birds are facing deportation again. So they're Vietnamese green finches. I actually kept, this is actually the color of them. I kept their little, their patterns, so the black tail, black wings, and black cap on their heads. So yeah, it speaks on what's happening now during this crisis. And yeah, they're being sent back to a country or to the communist regime who were persecuting them. So that's what's happening. So I'm kind of just playing with arrangement. Again, play. So I'm gonna put this down here. We can see the little birds and show you a couple of this one I made. So this one, we made these, or I made this out of these fabrics that we made during our second Hidden Heritages workshop. So it's actually pulling from my grandfather's travel journal. You could see left Saigon, April 30th, 1975. And then we printed them on the fabric, which I used here. And then here's another one that I made using my grandmother's rice sack. Here, I had to cut this thing up. It was really hard to do that, but I'm glad I did. So I love that it says American here. And then on the other side, it says enriched. So I loved that this happened too. So the rice sack said US #1. And when I cut the tail out, so I had to make these templates myself. And when I cut it out, it says US no, which like really describes the current immigration policies. Like, no, not for y'all. So that was really interesting the way, so those things happen and then they just help tell the story, and those things, and I don't, I don't plan for those things. So those are Hien's feet. So these are two different pieces, but I have a small studio, so I make use of every square inch, as you can see. So this is a drawing that I'm really excited about. This is a life-size portrait of Hien, my husband. And he is, I often draw my portraits not fully clothed, and I feel like it really describes the vulnerability as humans. So there he is, barefoot, and standing there, very gentle hands, kind of like his father's portrait, actually. And what I want to do is use his body as a map for his scars. So again, 4 years from the time his father's portrait was made until now, and it's still kind of, there's still that thread that's still moving through. So I want to mark his scars, and I've actually stamped them, and I'm really excited about this project. So here's a stamp of one of his scars. This one's on his forearm, and what I've done is just like put it on an ink pad. and I want to document the back. That's one that didn't work. I want to document the back and just actually write how he got the scar, what the situation was, where he was at, just to document.
This is really incredible. Jin, just want to give you a heads up. You have a few minutes left, yeah?
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So I'm making these arrows here and I'm fletching them. I've done a lot of research and I'm trying to use indigenous techniques. So I'm using found everything. So found branches, found string, found feathers. And what I want to do is pierce his photo or his drawing with these arrows here so that they barely miss him, right? So it's like survival and then scars. So it really speaks on, affliction. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I can show you some arrows. Do we have time? Let me know. So here's one of the arrows I made. This is parrot feathers. Unbelievable. This is, I get so excited. These are mallard feathers. And here's owl feathers. This is a great horned owl. I have a story about this owl too. So yeah, I'm using, and they all come from here. So I just collect branches. You can imagine what my hikes look like. It's crazy. Hands backpack, my backpack full of stones and sticks and things. And I'm sanding them and then I'm whittling them down. Yeah, it's a laborious process, but yeah, it's so necessary to tell the story. Yeah, it's hard. What's difficult for me is the arrangement, and that's why I play with so much, because there's so many elements and I don't want to overwhelm. So it's kind of like I liken the artistic, visual art process into writing, where I'm just kind of like gathering information and making all this stuff, and then I just have to edit. Like, what's the least amount that I need to help tell this story fully, or maybe not fully. So yeah, the editing is definitely one of the most difficult things for me to do. Yeah, because there's just like so many ideas, and then the ideas change, right? So like every day we're evolving, experiencing new things, and then we're moving towards like new ways of thinking, or just new ideas. So yeah, that's the tricky part for me.
Thank you so much, Jin. It's incredible, everything that you just shared with us, and also we have some comments on the chat here that I want to share with you. We have Dodi Chikon. I apologize for butchering your name here. Sichon. Actually, Charlotte Crook, who said, totally relating to you. You're wonderful. Thanks, Jin Mai. So I think your process is amazing. I can't wait to ask you everything. And but we have to go with our next artist now. And at the end, for our audience who's out there, at 1 p.m., we're going to officially end the show. However, we have the after party, meaning you can hang out with us for another like half hour, so you can ask all the questions that you want to, okay? We might end our live stream, do all that technicality, but we'll all be on Zoom with everyone. So without further ado, I would like to present our next artist, and that's Binh Danh. Binh Danh reconfigures traditional photographic techniques and processes in unconventional ways to delve into the connection between history, identity, and place. He earned an MFA from Stanford University. His work has been collected by the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, National Gallery of Art in Washington, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and San Jose Museum of Art, of course. He is an assistant professor of art at San Jose State University. How lucky are those students to have a superstar be their teacher, right? So with that, take it away, Binh.
Well, I'm definitely lucky to be teaching too. I love just teaching. Like as Trin and I, we use our work to really educate and teach. So thank you so much for attending this event, and thank you to the San Jose Museum of Art and Chopstick Alley for this collaboration. And also thank you to Trin for her just beautiful, amazing work. So I will be picking up where Trin left off about how vital the archive is to our practice. And since I'm actually in my office right now on campus, I'm gonna actually share with you a slide presentation. So I'm gonna start this right now. Um, so if you can give me a thumbs up if you can see presentation, great, thank you so much. Okay, so looking into family albums and family archive is essential to my development as an artist. And when I'm looking, many of the materials that piqued my curiosity were photographs. And so, for example, here is a wallet-side portrait of my mother, which was commissioned to help her find a husband. And it was when my parents' marriage was arranged through a photograph, which I find was quite amazing in a way, but it's actually pretty much what people do today if they go online and go onto those dating websites and stuff like that. But just the uniqueness of that this is a handheld wallet-side picture. So when I found this picture, I asked my mother, what is this translation here? And she say, it means a lonely person on a boat. And little did my mother know at the time that the Cambodian man she was going to marry had the crazy idea of taking the family on a boat to flee Vietnam after the war. So when I was growing up, my family rarely discussed the Vietnam War. It was something that occurred, and as a result, we left. And at the same time, I grew up helping my father at our family TV repair shop, right down on Santa Clara Street. And during my free time, I will watch movies, particularly Vietnam War movies. And through the movies, my exposure to Vietnam was a lush green landscape torn apart by war. And it got me thinking about how landscape really affected me at a young age, particularly landscape that has been devastated by war. So, you know, it was amazing how much Trin's archive and my archive kind of aligns. And when she was telling me the story about the picture of her husband's father wounded, and I just remembered that the picture I have of my father here, if you look on the slide on the bottom, is a picture of my father holding my sister. He has a wound from the war too, right by his face, his lips here. And you know, he also spends several months in a re-education camp. And these are stories that he doesn't really like to share with the family. I think it was also the burden these stories could cause, I don't know, too much trauma for a family who's trying to start again, start a new life in the state. So I'm going to show you just 4 projects. I'm going to try to do it in 20 minutes here. And the first project was, I started this project in 1999 when I was an art student, and I visited Vietnam for the first time. And Vietnam was an emotional trip for me as I was taken by the landscape. And I noticed that so much of the war was still part of the land. And I was confronted by the subtle and ubiquitous physical remnants of war. So when I came back to the United States, I was standing in my mother's garden, and this idea came to me as I was looking at the garden. I asked, what if I could print an image onto a leaf? And just like Trin, you know, these inspirational moments we have as artists, it's really hard to figure out where they come from. They just kind of come out, and we're there to kind of receive them. You know, we receive these ideas. So I developed this project called Corporal Printing. And then using the archives of the Vietnam War, the imageries of the Vietnam War, I printed photographic image onto the leaves through this process of photosynthesis. So this second body of work here, and over the summer of 2002, my mother and I visited a small island off the coast of Malaysia called Pulau Bidang, the site of a Southeast Asian refugee camp where we once lived. And this picture depicts refugees after being rescued arriving to Pulau Bidang Island. It was a picture I found on the internet. And I had this picture in mind. And when we got to the refugee camp, which is the ruins of refugee camp, I was very fascinated that this dock was kind of still there. So I knew I wanted to photograph this dock so then I could have both of these images kind of play off with each other. So this is now an abandoned site, but what's left are remnants of a forgotten community. Pulau Bidang officially opened as a refugee camp in 1978 with 121 Vietnamese refugees. A year later, that number grew to 40,000 Cambodian, Laotian, and Vietnamese crowded into an area the size of a football field. And I made this portrait of my mom on the beach holding an immigration document that allowed us to enter the United States as refugees. And traveling with her was quite an amazing experience. She was the one who remembered this event. I was only a baby at the time. And being on the island allowed her to reconnect to this period in her life, allowing her to not to forget the past, but to preserve it and grow from it. And so what was amazing about this place when we visited was that it was a living archives. We came upon like a fishing boat that was, was a refugee boat that was pulled off from the ocean and just left there in the middle of the jungle. And then like we walked through some of the buildings and we found drawings of boats, drawings left by the refugees these are metaphors for them, that the journey, the boat as a journey itself. This is another example. This is just a remnants of a building. I don't even know what building this was, but it was just, again, just amount of the growth of the jungle, just retaking it over again and just sucking in all that history. Some buildings have words and signage. For example, here is a sports section, so you can tell this was a community. This was infrastructure. It was, what you think about the Vietnamese community today in San Jose. These are infrastructure little divisions of towns and neighborhoods within this refugee island. And to pass the time on the island, mythological stories and legends were created. And I found this is where it's just so beautiful that people come up with these ideas in our, contemporary times, that of these heavens and gods and spirits out there saving them. So this one here was a spirit named Father Bidang. And you can see here on each of these plaques were family members dedicating a plaque to the spirit they call a Father Bidang, named after the island. And family would dedicate just thanking him for saving them, pulling them out of the ocean. And one of the plaque say Thanksgiving, and it reminds us of the celebration that's going to take place, celebration in quotation, of next week when we give thanks in our lives. And I think about the pilgrims who are trying to give thanks, to the indigenous people of this land for saving them. So the idea that the pilgrims were also boat people, that the history of boat people kind of started at the beginning of the founding of this nation, that it's not something that is foreign or new, but it's actually rooted within the land here. And then one of the amazing things too is the archives. These are letters and testimonies, governmental records. I actually have an ID that's a displaced person. I wish I had that slide in here so then it could, align with Trin's ID projects. But it was amazing just to find these materials And then, you know, they were all kind of soggy because it was wet, and my mother and I were trying to pull them off the ground. You know, we wanted to save them. So we collected as much as we can carry off the island. And we spend the time in the hotel room just reading them. You know, my mom would translate them to me because, you know, I'm really bad at reading Vietnamese. But I was very interested in how the materials decay. These are, again, you know, paper materials, which is, you know, something we don't really, I mean, in the days of online living now, we don't encounter the physicality of these artifacts, you know. So for example, here, you know, there's this, it looks like there's a worm or some sort of insect or a moth or butterfly ate through the layers of paper, you know, ingesting all that information. And I just, you know, imagine, like, where did the information go? You know, could it all just disappear, you know? And so then using this chlorophyll printing process, I printed the words onto this leaf here. Okay, so this next body of work, the third body of work, in 2011, I was invited by the Sheldon Museum of Art in Lincoln, Nebraska, to collaborate with the Vietnamese American community on a project called Vietnam, Nebraska. And this is just an installation shot of the entrance to the gallery. And like most immigrants and refugees who fled the United States, those of the first generation want to preserve their ethnic heritage and tradition. Immigrants resettle in Lincoln, Nebraska carry their cultural tools with them to remake the land to something that is familiar. And so I met this gentleman here, and he told me his name was York, and he names it after New York. And I wonder, that's so fabulous. You know, he's just this idea of New York, you know, we think about the Statue of Liberty, very iconic American ideas of, you know, of freedom and prosperity, you know. And he only would allow me to photograph him if carrying his South Vietnamese flag. You know, it was the only time I was allowed to photograph him. It was very kind of hard to work with the Vietnamese community at first because I had to kind of build trust with them. They thought that maybe I was a Vietnamese exchange student, and the photographs that I'm going to make of them, that I might take it to Vietnam and identify these, you know, these folks. And some of them were part of the South Vietnamese Army and who are also kind of blacklisted. So they were very fear of that. But after a while, opening up to them, they allowed me to photograph them. And it was very easy, you know, of course, with the college student here, or the Lin Bui, who was, or maybe still is, the senior program manager at the Asian Center. You know, so I was very fascinated with how the community operated within the middle of America, you know, Lincoln, Nebraska itself, you know, not San Jose, not Los Angeles, the middle America. And then they convert, you know, like a traditional craftsman house into a Buddhist temple, you know. And while I was there, I was also very fascinated, of course, with the history of Nebraska too, you know, because it's very important that I dig into the history to understand when I place my camera on the land, that I'm also thinking about the other histories that accumulates there, you know, not something in the past, but something just accumulates. And I found out about the photographer named Solomon Butcher, who photographed around Lincoln, Nebraska, or just in, you know, the Nebraska area during the Homestead Act. So during the Homestead, where, you know, the governments were giving these plots of lands, and families could apply to them if they could, you know, if they could improve onto the land. So I was very fascinated with that. You know, this is the idea here. You know, these families are standing out in front of this American dream, you know, home ownership of land too. And so I started to pose my subject as if they were subjects in the Solomon, in the Butcher's photograph here. So for example, this family here who gave me their time in this afternoon. And then I also wanted to show the community that the stories that surround these homes, not just the family standing at home, but the stories that surround them. So I asked the community if I could borrow photographs from their family albums. So with the help with the students at the University of Lincoln, Nebraska, we collected all these photographs and we scanned them in, and we made a large kind of mural digital prints. So there were two of those, and these prints are now in the collection at the Sheldon Museum of Art. And you know, it was an amazing opening too, because of the community was able to come, and it was the first time they saw themselves at the museum. It was the first time they ever been to the museum too, so that was very joyful to have that celebration. And my last project I want to show you, it's a current project I'm working on right now. So when I was growing up as an American kid, I always wanted to go camping. It was not something that my family did. And even the word camp conjures up image of refugee camps in our community of Southeast Asian. My parents definitely couldn't understand, you know, why would someone want to go out into the wilderness, you know, to live like refugees. You know, we were living like refugees for a whole year. You know, my father and uncle would have to go out and hunt and fish and collect rainwater. You know, there was times when there was not enough food to eat, you know. So they were just perplexed at that idea. But, you know, it was something, of course, you know, we do as an American, right? We're connected to also wilderness, because wilderness and the national parks and all the Western scenes kind of reflect the prosperity of what the American ideal. So this is my 5th grade journal when I went camping for the first time in the 5th grade. And it was the first time I ever used a camera too. So that when I didn't know my love of photography, which kind of really started, you know, when I was looking through the camera, this point and shoot camera that my father bought for me, and pointing out stuff in the landscape and wanting to remember these scenes, you know. And today, of course, because of these photographs, I still remember these moments that I was there as a 5th grade trying to, you know, understand like this wilderness place I was standing in. So also the archives today, now as an adult, the archives of the national park, especially the works of Carlton Walken, really influenced me. So I think in 2010, I started a journey photographing the national parks using the daguerreotype process. And I'll explain more about the daguerreotype, but if you look at this Carlton Walken photograph here, and Carlton Walken's was one of the first photographer to venture into Yosemite Valley in the 1860s, the early 1860s, and made these amazing pictures of Yosemite Valley. And because of these photographs, Abraham Lincoln, I believe in 1864, signed treaties to give Yosemite Valley to the state of California as protection. And California was also becoming a state during that time, becoming part of the Union too. The word nation was not available. We weren't a nation, which is unions. So the idea that the national parks came a little bit later. But when Carlton Walken was there, who was really focusing on the meaning of this place and the reflection that happens. And so then I modeled some of my daguerreotypes after the Carlton Walken's photograph here. So example, again, the reflection that happens when in this scene here, and the daguerreotype as a process also reflect the viewers too. And I'll show you some example in a couple minutes here. The other interesting thing about the daguerreotype process is that it reversed the image. It's a mirror image. So this is the famous tunnel view in Yosemite Valley here. In my picture is reversed, but in the Carlton Walken, you know, it's the correct way that the composition is supposed to be. So it kind of again plays kind of even tricks on your memories of the park. And these memories come because we see photographs of the park. And here is an example where viewers encounter the daguerreotype. They can also see their faces in the landscape, contemplating their identity or their connection to the national parks. I'm just gonna show you a couple more samples here. The picture on the right is the cartoon walk-in photograph. This is Lower Yosemite Fall. And then a lot of question I get is the blue tones that come into play. And that is because it's the highlights, when it gets overexposed, it becomes blue. And I just love the idea that these waterfalls are just little blue waterfall. And this is my last slide here. This is actually, this is one of my students from Hawaii, Brandon Ng, reflected into this photograph of the west, actually I believe the north entrance to Yellowstone National Park, where it's for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. So that's all I have for you right now, and I'll give it back to Trami for further guidance. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us your work. It looks incredible. For our audience, can you share with us what is the process for the daguerreotype, if it's not too complicated? We have a few minutes.
Yeah, it's the process is not too complicated, but the way I'm going to explain it now, it's basically a silver plate. And in the 19th century, they figure out that silver and salt, when it comes in contact, it becomes light sensitive. And that, that was the beginning of the invention of photography. So the silver plate and becomes light sensitive when it's fumed with iodine vapor. So the iodine is the salt, as we know, table salt is iodine. And then the plate is placed into a plate holder and then carry out into a view camera. So one of those old camera on a tripod that has bellows, looks like an accordion, and the image is projected onto the plate, the silver plate, for a couple of minutes, and then the plate is developed over warm mercury, and then gilded with gold chloride, and then you have something that looks like a jewelry. It's this really beautiful silver plate. My plates are a little bit larger than 19th century plates, but it also hit us in this very primal way, because when we see shiny objects, there's a reason why we like jewelries and we like chrome and all that, because it connects us back to our days when we were on the safari, when we were looking for water, refugees back then, the beginning of the human evolution, using the word refugee is not out of, definition here, but the migration that happens, and they're looking for water, looking for a new life, as conditions change, and as they are changing now through, global warming. Anyway, I tend to get off topic a lot, but I'll let you continue here.
Thank you. We have some comments and questions from our audience. So first, with a few comments here from Steve Sues. He says, I really enjoyed both presentations. Well, someone just muted me. What's that all about? Come on now. All right, here we go. Let's try that again. So Steve Sue says he really enjoyed both presentations, that he found the content very powerful in each of them. Fantastic exclamation point, and lots of compliments, and you can read them. So let's go to the questions. So we have for both of you, as each of you established and pursued your artistic careers, what challenges did you encounter in achieving support for your efforts? Let's start with Jin Mai.
I was very blessed, actually. My family, they're really creative people, mostly in music and literature. So I received a lot of support from my family and with my husband as well. One of the challenges I did have, though, was not selling my soul. I mean, not just artists make work for whatever reason why they make work. Yes, more art, please. But I had a lot of opportunities to work with interior design companies that were like, this is a cute painting, but can you add some pink? Because pink is really in right now. And I tried doing it, and it was surprising, because I knew it was my bread and butter. I knew I could just make them quickly, because at that time I was painting abstract work. So I was like, I could just toss paint on and it'll be fine. So my brain was like, yes, you want to be a painter. You need to make money doing this now, because it was right after graduation. But my soul just wouldn't let me work. And I remember my mom telling me, like, what are you doing? You have this huge opportunity. This is how you're going to make a steady living. Like, why aren't you working? And I just was so uninspired. I just had all of these empty canvases with a little bit of color, and I just could not finish them, and I never did. So that was one of the challenges I had, was that spiritual battle with, like, do I want to make the work that is going to sell, that I feel nothing for? And I tried, not to say that I wasn't going to sell out. Like, I was totally ready to do so, but it was a very strange experience, actually, because I couldn't figure out why I couldn't just finish the dang paintings, because they were easy and not emotional. So I didn't have to be vulnerable. It was a job. And so I struggled with that for a very long time, for the first couple years. But as far as like community support and family support, I've just been very fortunate. And yeah, everyone who I've ever come across during my journey, I just want to thank you. Yeah, so.
Thank you. And what about you, Ben?
Well, very similar too. You know, I mean, I have the support of my parents here. Although it was hard to kind of, in a way, educate them about the mission of the arts growing up and wanting to major in art in college. But my parents had the agreement with them that we could do whatever major we want as long as we graduate college. So, you know, I just majored in art and didn't know that it's going to lead me here today, back to where I started at San Jose State. But also just growing up and watching, my father was very innovative, you know, watching my mother at her altar, you know, and those are very creative acts that they do, like entrepreneur acts, and not knowing that that's also sorts of creativity too. And you know, it comes in all walks of life, where every profession is the ability just to be creative in whatever you do. So yes, I'm very fortunate in that way.
Thank you. And so with that, we're going to officially end our streaming, but we will continue with all the portion of the questions and answers. So for our audience, please hang on. We just need a few minutes to do the technicality. But I wanted to let you know that Hidden Heritages is an ongoing project. And you can follow the project on SJMA's website if you type in Hidden Heritages for updates on future related public programs. And I'm also going to leave you with this very inspiring quote from Mahatma Gandhi. You must not lose faith in humanity. Humanity is like an ocean. If a few drops of the ocean are dirty, the ocean does not become dirty. So I want you to think about that as we face today and the environment and the political scene, and have hope and hold hope in your heart, and because that's what both of our artists have done for themselves, for the art world, and especially for the Vietnamese community. We are super proud to have these two superstars. So thanks for joining us today.
She told the world with weary sighs she finished with the madness, cause golden girls with teary eyes were pinned down to the mattress, living in a tragedy and pillaged with the fallacy of privilege from a phallus seed, spilling all his malice seed inside her body, colonized and conquered. Cries were squandered, no surprise she's caught up. How to end her life was pondered. She thought of suicide, called it do or die, die or do. Life was through, an exit from the lesson shows the right to choose. Freedom was a beacon and she saw it through the darkness. Egregious was a treatment, but she called for truth regardless. Carried her bastard baby through the rain and all of the heartbreak. Scary disaster chase, she who sustains and follows the call of her heart's quake. Bruised but unbroken, truth that's unspoken. She's the movement's gun smoking, she's my music's love potion. I tell her story now because I'm able. With my penmanship she's exiting, and so we went and labeled her a feminist. An exodus from the stress of the world that she's been wrestling with since her days as a girl, until she took off from the crooked path, abandoned to martyrdom. Looking in the looking glass, reflection is tarnished, less traveled upon her, so she thought she did. Thought the world had slept on it, something has gotta give. Didn't know the painful path was also filled with righteousness. Vivid hope, a break from math, or swallow pills plus lies and shit. Painful paths are hopeful, insane and crass, but vocal cords that painted canvas dope though. Make my point get focal. She feels the trauma at her feet. I think she wants to really feel, but gifts the trauma's bittersweet, but lacks the armor, sword and shield. The American way, it's not sustainable, and we're preparing our brains to brave a painful road. I'm on a mission to a past profoundly rowdy, as the system comes crashing down around me. Don't become a slave to the thoughts of others, Look into the mirror and discover what we've covered up. No struggle means there's no progression. Muscles lean from sets and reps, and other means of stress prevention stunt our freedom's depth perception.